First of all, I would like to thank you again, Dr. Khawla Bendjemil, for your remarkable participation in our 6th International Conference of Literature and Environment and the 5th Biennial Conference of Arte Brazil at the University of Santa Úrsula, Rio de Janeiro, September 2023.
Thank you very much. The pleasure was mine. Thank you.
I also want to thank the kindness of Professor Paulo Alonso, Rector of Santa Úrsula University, and Professor Maria Geralda for the technical support to the interview, and also Bruno Farias. This interview is especially designed to Brazilian eco-friends, especially because it emphasizes a methodological framework of how history, environment, and memory are intermingled. Together, all these factors are well underlined by Dr. Khawla Bendjemil, proficiency in African literatures as well as post-colonial perspective. Professor, today you bring out important perspectives theoretically related to Algerian history, literary criticism, and the recent eco-criticism theoretical foundations. All of them help you to apply a successful method of reading, for example, the literatures of Kenya and Zimbabwe. If it's possible, please tell us about how the post-colonial perspective is important to read Algerian contemporary novels, as well as new facets and problems related to post-colonial era related to African novels underlined by environmental issues.
Thank you very much for your question. Thank you very much for your question and for having invited me to the conference, to the 6th International Conference in Brazil, ASLI Brazil. It was really a pleasure for me to meet you all, to meet different people from different professors from different parts of the world who are concerned with nature and environmental issues. Well, as you said, I work on post-colonialism and eco-criticism on both the relationship between nature and the environment in post-colonial context, and I mainly worked on African literature. For Algerian literature, it has its particularities, but it resembles African literature in many ways as well, and post-colonial literature in general. Well, for your question about the intersection of post-colonialism, eco-criticism, and Algerian contemporary literature, I would say that the intersection of Algerian history, literary criticism, in particular eco-criticism and post-colonial perspectives, can provide valuable insights when reading contemporary Algerian novels, as well as novels from other African countries, particularly when addressing environmental issues. This is because Algerian history, in the context of Algerian history, when trying to understand the historical context of Algeria, understanding the historical context of Algeria is crucial when reading Algerian contemporary novels, and that's why Algeria's history of colonialism, struggle for independence, and post-independence challenges profoundly influence the themes, the characters, and narratives in these novels. And that's how Algerian contemporary literature is crucial is crucial in this context. So the historical perspective helps readers appreciate the social, political, and cultural and environmental dynamics portrayed in this literature. I think this is all for contemporary Algerian literature. This is, if I want to answer the question briefly, but I would also add an idea that is sometimes that stands as a challenge sometimes for me, for critics, to read contemporary Algerian novels and other literary works, and African novels as well. It's the fact that many of these novels, of these narratives, do not concentrate on environmental issues per se. So there is a story that is set sometime, most of the time, during colonialism or after it, if we talk about contemporary Algerian and African novel literary works. So the setting is either during colonialism or after it, so after independence, and the focus is on the characters and the daily routine of the characters, challenges of the characters, and the socio-political context of the setting, of their place, of their countries, be it Algeria or another African country. So the challenge is that there is no focus on environmental issues. However, if we dig deep into the analysis, we always find environment and nature there surrounding these narratives, especially because these countries are these countries' topographies and geographies are very much connected to nature, and their stories and daily life or lives are connected to nature. So this is a challenge, but it doesn't mean that it's not possible to read it. And it is always reading such literary works always brings to light interesting conclusions and ideas related to environmental issues, either during colonialism or even after independence of such countries.
It's wonderful. So, to my understanding, you told two important things for us to keep in mind. For example, there is a natural theoretical methodology, which is post-coloniality, that links all these literatures from the global south. So this is one very important thing. Then I think that it can serve to all these countries and to a country like Brazil too, for research. And another important thing that you emphasized, that you told that apparently they do not connect the environment itself. And this is a very important issue because some of the professors may imagine that environment is something new, but it's never new. It's over there. It's hidden. It has to be read. It has to be discovered. It has to be interpreted. Is it what you want to say?
Yes, exactly. This is what I want to say. So, for example, in my master thesis, I worked on an Algerian novel that was originally written in French. So Algerian literature, when I said it's a little bit different from other African Anglophone literatures, in the sense that Algeria was colonized by the French, and many Anglophone African countries were colonized by the British, and so the means of the colonizer are not always the same. The culture is not the same. The native language of these African countries are not the same. Algeria is a northern African country, and it is more related to the Arab world, to the Middle East, more than Africa. But at the same time, it's an African country in the sense that it shares many characteristics of the history and culture and geography of these African countries. So when I go back to the novel that I studied, it was really a challenge for me, and I was afraid that I wouldn't find anything related to nature in it, because like anything related, where's the study using eco-criticism? because this novel, after I read its, I prepared its review of related literature, I found that all critics studied the novel from a feminist perspective, because it was a story of female characters. So from a feminist perspective and from a post-colonial perspective and psychoanalysis, that's all. Nobody talked about nature and its influence in the story itself, because the story seems from the first readings, seems that it is clearly about women's struggle in the during Algerian Revolution against the French colonialism. That's the story. But so I was afraid that maybe this is not the right novel, because there are many novels that are clearly concerned with nature and environmental issues. So if we take certain names of certain novelists, we know that this novelist writes about nature. So if I take one of his novels to study, it's easy, like it's not easy, but I know that I would find a lot of concepts and ideas related to environmental issues and themes. But for the other writers, like this is like the example that I'm talking about is Assia Jabbar. This is an Algerian novelist, and most of her novels are known to be about feminist stories, issues of female characters. This is her concern. This is her focus. So when I studied the novel, it was a challenge for me, and I was a bit afraid. But at the end, to my surprise, I was really amazed that I could find a lot of things related to nature, and I could find many ideas related and results related to the relationship between nature, the colonizer, and the colonized. And even in this case, also I was able to use ecofeminism, which is a combination of two theories, feminism and eco-criticism, to study the relationship between nature and female characters and colonialism. So yes, this is the idea that I wanted you to keep in mind, that even though the novel may not seem purely environmental related or focused on environmental issues, you can always find the relationship between nature and environment, especially that African societies, like many societies, native societies, Latin societies, and Latin American societies, and Asian societies, these are people who are connected to nature. They like nature. They feel that nature has certain spiritual powers. So studying nature in novels that are not focused on nature is always can always come up with surprises for us, literary.
Well, I think it's a sort of a challenge that everybody who is a student or professional in literature, they have to pay attention. And it depends on each other. I mean, it depends on people how to discover these invisible links. But we also made to understand certain presuppositions, such as the oppression of nature as well as the oppression of women. In the case of feminist novel, we also have to think about that the environment can be represented through several other ways, not only the natural environment, but it is also related to political, psychological, historical connections. And I would like you now to know if it's possible for you to specify a little bit some examples that you found on your research on these connections between women, history or political perspective, and environment in some your specific novels that you worked on.
Yeah, I can give you the example of this novel that I was talking about by Assia Jabbar. So it is entitled "Children of the New World." "Children of the New World" is a novel translated, as I said, into English because it was originally written in French, and the main characters are female characters who have different stories, and the setting is the Algerian Revolution revolution against the French colonialism at the time. So in this case, what I found, the results of my analysis were that these women, Algerian female characters, see nature or consider nature as a resort to them. So nature is the protector of the Algerian Revolution in general, and the one that protects them as women in particular. And how is that? Because when they live in villages or in small towns, they are always attacked by the French colonizers. They come to them. It's easy to reach them there. They come to them. They steal from them. They destroy their belongings, and also they are usually raped by those French colonizers. But if they hide in nature, which means here mountains, especially in mountains where it's not easy to get there, in places that are very hard to reach, in the mountains, inside the mountains. So nature here becomes, or in this case, the mountain becomes a place of protection for these women who participate in the Algerian Revolution or not. So this is one of the examples in this novel, and the results of my analysis that connects nature, colonizer, and women in the novel. So nature is a resort for them, is a place of protection. And on the other side, this same nature, this same mountain is a source of fear and hatred by the French colonizer. In a story, we can read that the French colonizer see the place, that is the mountain, as a horrible place, as an enemy, as a place that is a source of horror, because this is where women and men, Algerian men and women who are revolutionists, hide in, and this is where attacks from them can come from. So nature is usually neutral. It's a place, it's a mountain, it's just a mountain out there, but it is viewed by human beings differently. The colonizer sees it as a source of horror and fear and danger, but the colonized, the native people, see it, women or men, see it as a place of protection, of a resort, a place where they can hide in.
It's fascinating. Your explanation is fascinating, and we certainly feel like to read the novel and see all these important implications. It's really fascinating. And when you parallel all these differences and between Algerian perspective and the colonizer's perspective, regarding to nature. And now you talked about this nature as a protection, and just for curiosity, I would like to know if there is any particular or special representation of nature through the national symbols of Algeria, since we are talking about Algeria.
Yes. You would like to know what? Can you repeat your question, please?
I would like to know, just for curiosity, if there is any relationship between nature and the national symbols. For example, in Brazil, we have the colors of our flag represents the sky, the sun, the forests, the stars. So I would like to know if there is this particular challenge too. I know the relationship between nature and the national symbols. Just for
Yeah, we
curiosity.
do. We do in our flag too, which is really interesting and sometimes surprising to think about it because, like, if you talk to people, to Algerian commoners, they wouldn't think that we are so much connected to nature. But if we analyze it and focus on these things, we would really discover that there is nature surrounding us in our national symbols and in the flag, as you gave me the example of the flag. Indeed, in our flag, the Algerian flag looks like, well, you can google it. I cannot share my screen right away, but
Mhm.
it is green, white, and red, and the red in the middle, so half green, half white, and in the middle there is a crescent and the star. The crescent and the star refer to Islam, and they are red because red refers to the blood of martyrs who fought for the independence of Algeria. The white refers to peace, but the green refers to nature, to paradise. We usually say green is for paradise, is for gardens and everything that is green in green. So yes, we do have the green color, and even our national team of football, because it's one of the famous games in for the Algerian society, football. We call them the green.
Mm-hmm.
So
Wow,
yeah,
very
yeah. And
interesting.
in our flag, as I said, there is green, which refers to nature.
Well, I think it's very interesting relationship for further studies. The relationship between and the implications of nature in the past and in the present to the national symbols. But and I do thank you for this so important comments. Now I would like you to move to the Zimbabwe and Kenya novels and the relationship between nature in these countries or these cultures.
Yes. So the same thing. Well, this is when I said this echoes what I said about Algerian literature and other African countries' literatures. I said that they might be very different at different levels, at the level of culture, of language, of religion, of race, and of history. However, we can always find similarities because colonialism, whatever the colonizer is or whoever he was, there is all it is. Their means is always the same. It's destruction, it's exploitation of native peoples. So it's the method is always almost the same. So they do share these countries, whether in the northern part of Africa or in the southern part of Africa, they do share many similarities in the history of colonialism. So colonizer, be it a French, a Portuguese, or a Spanish or a British colonizer, they all had similar influences and impacts on these societies. And one of these impacts is environment. So when usually the colonizer comes to the African country, and this is depicted in many African novels in Kenya and Zimbabwe and other countries as well, and Nigerian and other African countries, it is depicted in their stories, which is the fact that when the colonizer comes, he came with the first excuse that we came to civilize you. You don't have a modern civilization, and we are here to help you. Now, what happens, and this is what African writers show in their stories, is that they destroy the civilization that existed before, the native civilization. If the civilization of the native Africans is simpler in comparison to the Westerners, it doesn't mean that it is not existent. They did have their own ways of life, their own methods of dealing, their own laws, their own methods, and their own laws and their own religion systems of religion, of economy. They did it. If the Westerners thought it was simple, that's their way of thinking, but they did have their own civilization. Now, when the colonizer comes, he usually destroys towns that are more nature-like. They are not very modern because there is no cement, no infrastructure that disrupts the natural order. So African societies usually live in towns that are nature friendly. When the colonizer comes, so he changes the environment of those African societies, and this is what African novels, either in Zimbabwe or in Kenya or in Nigeria, as I said, or in other countries, this is what they depict in their stories. The change that the colonizer comes brings about, and this change is usually negative as far as nature is concerned. So they come, there is usually a river, like in the story in Kenya, there is a river that is very beneficial for the natives. They fish there. It's a means for transportation for them and a means of clear water for them. When the colonizer comes, he destroys that river because he wants to build something, to build a monument or sometimes a museum that is not useful for the natives. They don't need a museum there. They need a source of clean water there. So what he does, he destroys nature, he cuts trees, he does a lot of changes in the nature of in that environment, and this influences very negatively nature per se and even the inhabitants. This is when the colonizer is there. After the end of colonialism and during independent time, or during the times of independence, what happens is that the new rulers who are supposedly African and native, the rulers of African countries, they mimic the colonizer. They want to look like the Western countries, and in order to look like them, they start building monuments or buildings. They bring cement to that place, and they do the same thing that the colonizer has done. And this is as far as these novels are concerned. So I want to say that during colonialism or even after it, it's the same thing. There is always injustice done to both people and their nature, unfortunately.
Oh, okay. So you told something very important in the beginning, because I think that there is a parallel that you pointed out very well to all these African novels. The problem of between modernity and tradition, correct?
Yes.
You emphasized this very well. So I think it's like the first characteristics of colonialism, which was to disrupt or to create this link between modernity and tradition, and you emphasized very well this point. I see that. Would you like to add something more, or because for me, it's everything is clear. For me, everything is perfect, and it's a very good starting point for readers, for the eco friends of Brazil, to think about that and maybe read.
Yes. Well, what I want to add that I'm also interested in Brazilian literature now. I've never met in my career Brazilian literary works, but I'm interested to learn. And what I learned from my very short experience with nature, environment, eco-criticism, and post-colonialism is that humanity is the same, and wherever we go, even in the literary works, we can always find similarities because we are
Yes.
at the end and before anything, we are all humans. So we can always identify with each other, whatever the context is. And however our differences are, we are all humans, and we can always find parallels and similarities and common points. And I would believe that we would all think that nature is something that gathers us all. Wherever we are, nature unites us.
Well, I think that these last words of you, they are very remarkable because nature is there, it's present everywhere. And I think it's a very important link that unites us all because we are all dependent on nature and we are only small beings in this entire world that depend on nature, only
Yeah, yeah.
one of. And
Yes,
I think that this is a very important issue in eco-criticism.
yes, it
Very,
is.
very important aspect. And I'm really sorry for not having someone else interact with you. But I
But that's
think that our interview is extremely important for us, extremely important to people who develop the perspectives on eco-criticism related to post-colonial, related to feminine studies, women's studies, related to race and everything. All these categories are inside, are relevant to understand eco-criticism.
yes, yes,
And
yes.
we have pointed out. I want to thank you once more for your presentation, for your interview to be read with us. And we are certainly be in contact and develop within us, the Brazil, perspectives and links and exchange of knowledge. Thank you so much, Dr. Khawla.
Thank you. Thank you, dear Professor Zidia. Thank you so much. The pleasure was mine. And as I said at the beginning, I'm very happy and I feel lucky that I have met you. And because this opens up new perspectives for me personally, and even for colleagues around the world, and my Algerian colleagues as well, to look at the Brazilian window this time. Thank
Yeah,
you.
and it's 9:38 in Brazil in the morning. I guess that you are in the afternoon in Algeria, and we
Yeah, it
send.
is.
I send hello to our colleagues, other professors who are, and they were going to be invited later to see this interview as well as the Brazilians because this interview will display at YouTube.
Yeah, same thing. Hello from Algeria. It's 1:38 here.
All
Yeah.
right.
Yes.
Take
Thank you very
care.
much. Take care.
Bye
Bye bye.
bye.
Bye. Bye bye.